Welcome to the Real CP Show. I am your host, CP. In today's topic, this particular war criminality one, Ethiopian one, whichever tribe that he had resided from before he fled from that fighting Ethiopia country in Africa. And he became an illegal immigrant. Now they have their own tribalism problems, right? And unfortunately, these are also the kind of conversations that there are numbers of people who do not want to have. So the thing about it is Africa is not Fantasy Island, right? Mr. O'Rourke and Tattoo are not coming back on a TV screen anymore. You understand? They're not coming back on a TV screen anymore. The type of what we call Ethiopians over there, because there are almost 100 distinct tribes in Ethiopia now. And how many of them also have major tribalism, along with however many also have, the ones it applies to, have a type of westernized thinking. How many of them over in the various tribalism in various parts of Ethiopia also sit there and cannot stand one another, right? And will sell however other tribe or tribes out in an extremely short manner. So I know these are the kind of conversations that some person we don't want to have on that. Because again, the Africa of before is not the Africa of this 21st century. Let me say this again, the Africa that there are some people who want to romanticize what Africa, what they think it is, it ain't coming back. Major foreign interventionists, International Monetary Fund with loans that many of these countries in Africa cannot ever pay back. You understand? Which means that they own various sections of Africa. You understand what the playbook is. So it is a disdainment, animosity, embarrassment, insult. When you do have some people that flee from this great ancient continent of Africa and flee over to America, the one applies to, and still have the nerve to try to look crazy at Black Americans. You understand? It's an embarrassment on that. Because Ethiopia was the only primary country that was fighting back at a high level against various colonizers. And some people that know, I have relayed, they have not forgotten about that. So what do? Just like they go in other different countries and they sit there and say, hey, you silly Nick. Hey, you tribe person over here in Africa. That other tribe over there, they said that you ain't nothing but a baboon's testicle. They said, what? Yeah, they said your mama is a baboon lover. They what? Right? You see how that game they play, causing frictionality, tribalism, conflict. And it has been working brilliantly for quite a number of generations. And so this particular Ethiopian one who fled from this ancient country in Africa and became a legal immigrant, and he thought he's going to get very comfortable because there are a certain number of personnel within certain parts of Africa who have gotten their comfortability on, right? Now, they couldn't sit there and fix various sections of Africa. So, when they fled over to America, hey, they got a little too comfortable with their britches. And again, this is not about some of the good numbers of personnel from Ethiopia. There's nothing to do with some of the good personnel from sectionality of Africa. They're ones who know who they are. But at the same time, it is a foolishness, a cock's tail, to sit there and pretend that the Africa of before is the Africa of now. I don't think so. So let me go ahead and share my screen with this particular part. This is going to be a real fast show on that. Let me just read this. This article was March the 10th, 2026. Today is April the 20th, 2026. ICE removes violent paramilitary war criminal and terrorist to Ethiopia. On March the 4th, 2026, ICE removed Solomon Bagali or something like that, a member of a deadly paramilitary organization for now, something like that, back to Ethiopia. Funel has been designated as a terrorist group by the Ethiopian government. Bagali, a native and citizen of Ethiopia, entered the United States on September 16, 2023 without inspection, means that he was a border breaker, a legal immigrant. But we go to pretend that don't happen, right? Okay. Oh, but Black American Negroes, they're all complaining about racism. Okay. Without inspection, U.S. Customs and Border Protection encountered him, this border breaker legal immigrant, 2 days later and instituted removal proceedings. Our officers continue to effect the removal of suspected human rights violators to their home country. Such and such personnel relayed this. ERO officers are committed to public safety and national security, and removing this border breaker, legal immigrant, violent individual from the United States serves both of these priorities. An immigration judge in Baltimore, Maryland, denied Bengali immigration benefits, that means unearned reparations of some sort, after ICE discovered numerous social media accounts where he openly identified himself as a member of FANAU, a Tier 3 terrorist group. In his post, Bengali called for the persecution of and violence against ethnic Tigrayans through their cleansing from Ethiopia. The case was litigated by ICE's Office of Principal Legal Advisor in Baltimore with help from the Human Rights Violators and War Crimes Center. Second here. The HSI led human rights. Let me move up this a little bit. The HSI-led Human Rights Violators and War Crimes Center furthers the government's efforts to identify, locate, and prosecute human rights abusers in the U.S., including those who are known or suspected to have participated in persecution, war crimes, genocide, torture, extrajudicial unaliveness, female genital manipulation, or use of recruitment of child soldiers. Now, isn't it interesting, right? This is some Baka Chica tales. Where is the male genital mutilation? Oh, what? You think there's no persecutionists of violent criminalityness in various sections, in various places that sit there and cut off the genitalia of males to control? What about the conversation about the numbers of child male soldiers that get robbed? You know the word REPED. What about the numbers of males, that get grabbed up involuntarily and put within these, however, groups to fight in different places, right? And how many of them have gotten REPED? What about that conversation? That's another whole topic in itself. Since 2003, ICE has arrested more than 520 people for human rights related violations of the law under various criminal immigration statutes. During the same period, ICE obtained deportation orders against and physically removed the from the United States, 1,178 known or suspected human rights violators and facilitated the departures of an additional 208. The Human Rights Violators and War Crimes Center has issued more than 80,000 lookouts for potential perpetrators of human rights abuses and stopped over 415 human rights violators and war crimes suspect from entering the U.S. Now, here's the wild part about it. Talking about the Human Rights Violators and War Crimes Center. What about all these gigantic racial hostility war crimes that's been going for centuries toward Black Americans? Huh? What about that? What about the human rights inhuman treatment of Black Americans for centuries? Where is all that sitting there? War criminality toward Black Americans, or human rights violations toward Black Americans for centuries. It's almost like people sitting there salivating in Black Americans' face overall and say, "Yeah, we're just going to use war criminality terminology, but we gonna pretend we ain't gonna look within the U.S. We're gonna look at the most hated people in the U.S. is Black Americans, the most lynched, the most hateful, inhuman laws that's ever existed, policies toward anybody else in America ever, and put upon blood pain toward Black Americans. You got people act like they don't know nothing. What an insult. But again, they know it's not enough Black Americans who will not sit there and stop ignoring this reality. So let me go ahead and stop sharing that. The other thing I wanted to show real fast on that. Oh, by the way, again, you got people don't act like, Black Americans are not going through Black pain every day, right? That's right. And they'll do like this. Nothing. I know nothing. They'll do what? I know nothing. Right? You see how that goes on that. What an insult. So right here, let me play a little bit of this particular part from this particular Ethiopian woman whose parents got away from homosexual in Ethiopia. And now, by the way, let me relay this right quick. You have about 5 or 6 main ethnic distinct tribes in Ethiopia. Oromo, Amhara, Somalians. Yes, they're Ethiopian Somalians. Tigrayans, I think it was another group. I forgot the freaking group what it was. But it's about 5 or 6 different groups in Africa in Ethiopia, that are some of the main groups and stuff, ethnic groups on that situation. And the thing about it is, what's wild is that how you will see so much still tribalism within various sections of Ethiopia. And it's like there is no pan-Ethiopian love within Ethiopia like that. There's no such thing. And unfortunately, there are some people that, they don't really know what's going on because they want to show Africa overall as some utopianness of Pan-Africanism, and there is just no such thing as that, right? So that it goes. But the thing about it is, before I show this, let me relate this again. I think it was Oromo, Amhara, Somalian. What was the other one? God dang it. I'm trying to think about that. Give me a second. Now I've got to look at this. I got to look some up here. Okay, here we go. Oromo, Amhara, Somali, Tigray, Sadamas, and Garaji. I may be saying it incorrectly. So the 5 or 6 main ethnic groups in Ethiopia are Oromo, Amhara, Somali. Again, yes, they're Ethiopian Somalians. Tigrayans, Sadama, and Garanji, and some other ones and stuff like that. I mean, there's all kind of other groups that you can go into and stuff like that. But those are the main 5 or 6. And so those are usually not even talked about a lot, because when you say Ethiopia, you got people that use Ethiopia in some genericality, like they say Africa, which is again very genericality. What are you talking about without no context? And many people use Africa out of context, because there is definitely no modern day pan-Africanist love with one another. You got five distinct areas of Africa: North, East, West, South, and Central. There is no pan-Africanism, truly modern day pan-Africanism going on within the five major regions of Africa. Too many tribalism going on. You got hundreds of tribes, hundreds of tribes, hundreds of languages, right? One of the most genetic diversity places on the planet is Africa. You'd be like, what? I know, right? Because it's like, wait, how is that possible that within the two largest continents on this planet, Asia and basically Africa, and you got Black Africans, right? I'm just giving an example because that's what we think Africa is, right? Black looking, right? Phenotype Black looking. And about 99%, especially depending on what part of Africa, it's going to be Black phenotype Africans. It's like, they'd be like, so what? The ones who know, they'd be like, so what? There is more genetic diversity in that Black phenotype, right, than anywhere else on this planet. But again, people tell Black Americans, just call themselves Africans. You don't get the cock-a-chaka tail out of here with that nonsense. So let's go ahead and play this particular part from this particular Ethiopian woman. Men will make sure not to talk about which particular tribe. See, that's the whole game in itself. So you got people that use very genericalities when they say Africa. And so the ones that flee over to America, don't say, they make sure to use some generic terminology. So they'll say, well, we're from Nigeria. Which part of Nigeria? Which tribe? We're from Somalia. Which part of Somalia? Which tribe? We're from Kenya. Which part of Kenya? Which tribe? You understand, right? They're from Eritrea. Which part of Eritrea? Which tribe? We're from Congo. Which part of Congo? Which tribe? Right. And they know many Black Americans are not going to ask that question. It's like, oh, it's from Nigeria. Oh, okay, Nigeria. Forget that. There's many tribes in Nigeria. Which one? See, again, that's the problem. See, they know quite no Black Americans are not going to ask the pertinent questions and not just hear some genericality saying Africa or some genericality of saying certain country. See, Black Americans do not have the luxury to say, well, we are this tribe or tribalism within Black Americanism. It don't work like that. Black Americans are Black Americans. Period. For reality. So let's go ahead and listen to what this particular Ethiopian woman, beautiful looking Ethiopian woman, whatever tribe she's from, right? But she's going to sit there and make sure that she's talking about her particular, however, Ethiopian is, right? Not we all the same people. No, I'm with my Black Americans. No, it's about what they are talking about. And I don't know why certain others within certain Black Americanism don't get it through certain mentalities that it is about a individual country, individual place on the planet, about individual accolades and what people want to make sure individual histories and traditions and thoughts, right, and beliefs and stuff like that make a person's culture. But for some reason, you got people that didn't put this little knock stuff in part of certain people within Black American mentality act like that Black America's supposed to be the most open door personnel ever and get laughed at collectively.
Brimadine was born in a refugee camp in Sudan 35 years ago. Her parents, both from Ethiopia's Tigray region, fled conflict between the territory and Ethiopian government.
This is my baby sister being born here. That's me. That's my grandfather. That's my father there. This is my cousin. And these are other people. This is in the refugee camp.
For more than a year, Tigrayan rebels have been fighting with forces of Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Mabel's father is back in Tigray, but she hasn't spoken to him since June.
Let me make a correction. Okay, she said from the Tigray region. That's still generically, by the way, but that is part of a certain ethnic group and stuff like that. But what I'm saying is that she makes sure on this situation, say the Tigray region. She didn't say some generic Ethiopian region. You see how that goes, right? But let's continue on that. Let's continue.
June 28, when communications in and out of the region were cut off. She doesn't know if he's alive and says the war amounts to genocide.
I miss my dad a lot. And I miss him a lot. So I really feel that Abi's goal at this moment is to erase us, to shut us up, to make us go away. He's a murderer and he is killing an entire ethnicity. And so I think back to my father. I can't stop. I have to continue talking about Tigray because my children deserve to know where they're from.
Ethiopia is a major strategic ally of the US, but Washington says it's ready to impose sanctions if fighting there continues.
The Ethiopians call the TPLF terrorists, and the TPLF is saying, stop the genocide against Tigray. The truth is that they're suffering on all sides. They seem to be still not ready to seriously discuss stopping the fighting. And until the parties within are ready to be serious, all the pressure from without is not going to make a difference.
You see all that fighting that's happening in various sections of Ethiopia, right? Against some internal tribalism scenarios. You see how that goes, right? And like the beautiful Tigrayan Ethiopian sister, she was like, look, she's about Tigrayan, right? Which that's fine. She's not saying, look, hey man, the other dozens of other type of Ethiopian tribes. She's not saying, yeah, we got to all come together. She knows better than that. But numbers of Black Americans, Black Americans are told, you ain't supposed to think like that. You're supposed to be open up to everybody with an Americanism to sit there and say whatever else they want to Black Americans. I'm talking the ones it applies to, right? Black Americans are not supposed to have their own cultural pride. See, not that little nonsensical stuff that people tried in various sections of main meetings and some other entities and some tethers and some other people, right? You know, not that little game plan and stuff like that, try to showcase some barely a half a point of some piece of point of some Black Americans that do some wrong things, as if you don't hear numbers of Spanish doing wrong stuff, as if there are certain numbers of Asians that do wrong stuff, as if you get the point, right? And certainly we know the true person who committed criminality upon no other ever that's ever existed in America is various sections of the person that within the Panamanian culture once applies to. All the progenitors of violence, all the progenitors of lying, all the progenitors of receiving DEI, all the progenitors of true affirmative action recipients, right? But must lie and sit there and magically delicious and some, and some kind of racklockiness to act like that. No, it's Black Americans that sit there and receive affirmative action, and Black Americans are the DEI. What? See how the game goes, right? So the thing about it is, I want to sit there and play this for a few minutes because they was talking about how that guy, the border breaker illegal immigrant from whatever particular tribe of Ethiopia he fled from for now, whatever organization. Let's just hear a little bit about that.
Ethiopia, a country with a rich history marked by both unity and diversity, has encountered numerous internal conflicts over the past few decades. One of the most pressing challenges today is the ongoing conflict in the Amhara region, which has deeply affected both the area and the nation at large.
Heavy fighting has flared up again in several parts of the Ethiopian region of Amhara, where government troops are battling a local militia. Artillery was used in the latest clashes.
A major player in this conflict is the Fano militia. Initially formed as a loosely organized group of armed volunteers, Fano has evolved into a formidable force in Amhara. Fano's popularity among Amhara nationalists soared as they were viewed as defenders of the region's rights and territorial claims. In this episode of African Biographics, we look at the origins of Fano, a militia group deeply rooted in Ethiopia's Amhara region, and also examine the complex factors that have led to the current conflict in the area. Fano is a fragmented group of loosely organized militias that claims to be defending the rights of the Amhara, Ethiopia's second largest ethnic group. They enjoy broad popular support within the Amhara community. The Fano militias advocate for the restoration of Amhara control over their traditional homelands, including areas in the western and southern Tigray zones. The term Fano has deep historical roots dating back centuries. In Amharic, it refers to someone who travels on their own accord or a band of leaderless soldiers who are not accountable to anyone. In pre-20th century Ethiopia, Fano played a crucial role as a source of armed labor for regional rulers who would mobilize them to fight during times of need. In the 20th century, under the more centralized rule of Emperor Haile Selassie I, Fano were also called upon to resist the Italian invasion and occupation of Ethiopia from 1936 to 1941. Later, during the rise of the Marxist-Leninist Ethiopian student movement, the term Fano was adopted to describe its members in their struggle against both the Haile Selassie regime and the Derg regime that followed. The rise of the present-day Fano militia in Amhara needs to be looked at in the context of Ethiopia's ethnic federalism, which is deeply embedded in the country's constitution. Historically, the Amhara people have held significant influence in Ethiopian politics, particularly during the reign of Emperor Haile Selassie, which lasted until his overthrow in 1974. Following his fall, Ethiopia came under the control of a Marxist regime known as the Derg, which ruled the country through authoritarian means. The Derg's rule came to an end in 1991 when it was overthrown by the Tigray People's Liberation Front, the TPLF, with support from Eritrean rebels. In May 1991, the TPLF led the establishment of the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, the EPRDF, a coalition that introduced a new political framework based on ethnic federalism. Ethiopia officially adopted a federal system in 1995, primarily to manage its diverse population, which includes over 80 ethno-linguistic groups. Under this system, the country was reorganized into ethno-regions, with some regions being quite large, such as Amhara and Oromia, while others are smaller, reflecting the size and distribution of the dominant ethnic groups in those areas.
Look at that right there. That don't look like no pan-Ethiopianist, fantasy islandist. No. Right? Let me go back here on that. See the different regions on that? See, Somalian version, right? Afar, Amhara, Tigray, Gambela, Southwest Ethiopia, South Ethiopia, Sidama, Central Ethiopia, it is Ababa, right? Oroya, Harari, right? They have their own distinct regions. Nothing wrong with having your own distinction. What the problem is that when they tell Black Americans that Black Americans are not supposed to have their own distinct culture.
Nothing. I know nothing. I know nothing.
See, that's the problem on that situation. And it's a legal immigrant situation that's coming from various sections of different places, be it certain sections of Africa, the one it applies to, certain parts of the Caribbean, the one it applies to. You get the point, right? See, there's a problem with this. There's a major problem with border break illegal immigrants, right? And even when you start talking about legal wink immigration is to a certain point, which is allowed by a certain type of supremacist system, nothing wrong with, again, certain numbers of immigration. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's when you got certain people that fall under these kind of categories that when they have a disdain toward Black Americans and act as if they came over to America with $2 in their pocket. You're like, how'd you get on the ship? Well, we saved up our money from doing what? Well, we were selling crops. We were sitting there cleaning some shoes. You couldn't stay over there and do that? You understand, right? We heard that America is the land of milk and honey. not for Black Americans. Do you understand that? And how many sit there and direct, indirect, was sitting there just begging, allow us to be looked at as Anglo, and we would do whatever the bidding that certain numbers of people within the Panamanian culture wants to do. And there are ones who did that and showed their disdainment and KKK-minded hatred toward Black Americans. Then and still now going into the 21st century. Yes. Yes. And then again, to have the numbers of tethering type people to flee from the ancient continent of Africa, flee from certain various sections of the beautiful various sections of the Caribbean islands, right? Where still certain type of post-colonizing this situations, mentality still are instinctive in certain numbers within certain Caribbeanness, because there is no pan-Caribbean love. Look what's going on within Cuba, one of the largest Caribbean islands in the Caribbean. And look at that embargo that's been going on for, what is it? Minimum of what, two or three generations now? Huh? So where's that pan-Caribbean connection to say, hey, supremacists, you got to uplift, you got to stop that embargo of our Cuban Caribbean brothers and sisters? No, because they all have their own distinct Caribbeanness. Nothing wrong with that. Just like in Africa, nothing wrong with people having their own tribes and doing their own situations. It's not a necessarily good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's just a thing. It's just when you got fleers that flee. Or depending, sometimes they do that, and sometimes they come across, after they go across the Atlantic Ocean. And that's the crazy part. He said, wait a minute, to leave Africa, you got to go across the Atlantic Ocean. What? Huh? You got to go across the Atlantic Ocean to do all that, but they couldn't stay in this ancient continent of Africa and build up whatever country or place or region up in Africa, but they had to flee to America? What? And have the nerve to talk about Black Americans? Please. That's where it's a major problem. Not some of the good brothers and sisters from the Caribbean that sit there made their way to America. Not some of the good brothers and sisters from Africa that made their way from Africa in a legitimate way. And they come over, which, by the way, extremely exclamation point, parentheses, a small number will be allowed to come to America, and even a smaller number will slip through the cracks and then still be humbleness and allowability to come to America and still show the respect to Black Americans, knowing for without Black Americans that many of these groups would not even be able to come to America. See, those are the ones that you give credit to. Those are the small numbers. The rest in those groups of fleers, they hate Black Americans. And if they can sit there and put on a KKK hatred, vile, right, inhuman, anti-Black Americanism type mentality, instilled within various sections of Panamanian culture, they would do it if they could sit there and be part of that. Those are some dangerous type tethers and fleers. But they want Black Americans to act like that's not happening. Instead of more being like this.
I say this calls for action, and now, nip it in the bud.
Thank you for tuning in to the Real CP Show. But by the way, let me sit there and show you one last thing on that situation. On this situation.
Where does it come from? All this hatred. Do you think it might be a little more serious than missing persons?
I don't think so, boy.
Some things are worth dying for.
You admire these kids, don't you?
Don't you? Did it ever occur to them they would end up dead? Maybe. I'm looking for some information.
I ain't got nothing to say to you, sir.
Happening late?
Do you honestly think you people be down here at all going for those two white boys?
not missed out.
This is.
Mm.
I'm guessing over here.
I'm here to tell you our neighbors were happy. Several people in color. Kids came down here stirring things up. Before that, there wasn't anybody complaining. Nobody dared.
What's wrong with these people? What's wrong with these people?
Mm. People that know about this movie. And if the person haven't seen this movie, however different groups or cultures or backgrounds, and they can see this, access this movie, they need to take a look at this movie and ask themselves, oh my goodness, we haven't had to go through anything like this. So we understand these Black Americans, oh my goodness, we respect their fightingness on that. This was going on right here. This is reality based upon trueness. This is still going on less than 100 years ago, people. This is actually going on less than 60 years ago, 70 years ago. This was still going on. See, they didn't do this because that personnel was from certain sections of Ethiopia or Nigeria or Kenya or Ghana or Congo. They didn't do this because, oh, they was from Barbados. They didn't do this because they was from Jamaica. They didn't do this because they're from Trinidad and Tobago. They didn't do this because they're from Grenada. Do you understand? They did it because they were Black Americans and wanted to instill Black pain. And more Black Americans about to wake the freak up and understand they must fight, at least collectively, for Black Americanness. Because many are falling even more and more to this terrorism, to this immigrationist onslaught and agenda. More Black Americans are falling and they don't understand that they about to derail. I thank you for tuning in to the Real CP Show.